Public art is a very difficult platform. I think it's more than just presenting a work for interior space. You bear a responsibility beyond the realm of aesthetic. You're also addressing the community. It is about civic pride. It's about civic responsibility. I think those factors have to be kept in mind when you are creating a space that the community has ownership of.
The 1% for Art program came about in the mid to late 1980s. 1% of the engineer's costs of a public building should be set aside for adornment by art. You know, when the big sports networks show up for a big game and they want to show symbols of the city, what do they show? Well, one of the things that they show often is the Sky Station's sculptures on top of Bartle Hall. That has become a symbol of the city in many ways, and that is part of the 1% for Art project. Had 54 works of public art out there. Now that the new single terminal at KCI is finished, we just added 28 more. So we now have 82 works of public art.
These are my fingerprints of making the handmade ceramic pieces.
Oh, I see. That's awesome.
If you see all the local artists' work, they are at the concourse wall right by the gate. It's the local artists who are inviting you into the city, and it's the local artists who are saying goodbye as people leave the city.
You'll be able to use your device in your hand, scan the QR code, and Linda's actually made a whole list of all the different elements she's used in here, little facts about the plants, recipes, all kinds of fun things that as you're sitting here waiting for your flight, you can actually learn something new.
The art commissioner, James Martin, and Holly Hayden did a phenomenal job of getting a separate jury, blind jury for every space. And for all the local projects, local artists, the jury was national. And for all the national artists, the jury was local. Here, it was just the work, and the work alone stood for itself.
We had a different selection panel for each of the locations, and that meant that we had a lot more selection panelists involved in the process, over 50 selection panelists. What we found in the artists who were selected is that there were things that kept coming up. Kansas City's incredible music history, for one. The incredible skies that we have here, the incredible prairie grasses that we have here, the flora and fauna, immigration and diaspora. The fact that Kansas City is a very international city, even though we're right here in the middle of the country.
I started thinking about really what makes up a city is the people that are in the city. So that was kind of what I did for my, my proposal and what I was commissioned for. I tried to choose various aspects of the city and the people in the city. So capturing everything from kind of the work ethic, I think, you know, kind of a Midwest work ethic, the lush and the green and the richness, I think, that's here. I think I try to capture kind of the music scene, as well as the advocacy for the arts and hearing your voice. And then, you know, just the opportunity for families to, you know, kind of be here and the affordability of what it means to be here.
We always go through these moments where we question what we do. Am I really any good? You know, is my work really of value? I cut, I burn. Every day when I work with this material, it takes a lot out of me as a human being. And just to get that validation on a personal level is so deep and profound for me. It is huge for my career because a lot of people don't realize that this work has been selected by a national jury comprising of art connoisseurs, art critics from all across the country, from California, from the East Coast, from the West Coast, everywhere.
You know, I think there is a perception out there that art is extra, that it's not essential, that it's not infrastructure. It needs to be considered something very central to the human experience and and for the best human outcomes in things like health and community. People have a need for aesthetic enjoyment.
The city, like many cities and many units of government at different levels, haven't funded infrastructure improvements and maintenance like they should. One of the biggest backlogs is on water line repair because we've got water lines that are older than me, if that's believable. Water can get contaminated and people can be without water for a while. Now, we've had a problem with the sewer overflows. And then in a lot of areas out here where I live in the Ruskin-Hickman Mills community, we don't have any sidewalks. So I see people, including children, walking in the streets. Every year, we could easily spend or recommend spending over 10 times the money we have available, because the need is so great. I don't think the public art program is a real threat to general funding of our infrastructure needs. I think the real threat is that for decades, the city just hasn't spent enough money on maintaining our basic public infrastructure that really contributes a lot to public safety if it's well maintained.
If we can demonstrate that this really small amount of money has been very effective for creating community with people who have very different backgrounds and different orientations, then I think cities and other agencies are going to see public art as a great investment.
I'm really proud of all the artists that worked with me and are part of this commission. I'm really proud of the pieces that I put together, and I think it also offers some credibility to the local artists to be with some of these other larger national art. So it kind of really elevates, I believe, all of us.